Welcome, everybody, to the PFN Dallas Cowboys podcast playoff edition. I'm Jess Navarez, joined alongside Dalton Miller. Dalton, happy playoff week, my friend. The Cowboys did it. They took over the NFC East, and they are the number 2 seed in the NFC. Cheers to that, my friend.
Absolutely. And I think looking at it objectively as a non-Cowboys fan, if I can do that,
I believe in you.
I think Dak Prescott was the best quarterback in the NFL this year. And was it a bit of a down year for guys like Patrick Mahomes? Yes. Josh Allen? A little bit. I still thought Josh Allen was fantastic. But like Lamar Jackson had an MVP caliber season this year. I don't think it would have necessarily been an MVP caliber season in most years. And I think that their defense being so good, because when you look at his numbers compared to Dak's numbers and games under 50 QBR, that's ESPN's QBR, guys, that is not quarterback rating. Games under 50, his team was 3-1 in games where he did not play very well. The Dallas Cowboys were 0-3 when Dak didn't play well. So when we talk about value, who's more valuable? Because that's what the award freaking says. It's talking about the value of the player. If you want to say it's the most outstanding player, even better. Change the name of the award. And I know you didn't tee me up for the hot take, but this is my hot or not. Change the name of the award to most outstanding player. So one, it doesn't absolutely have to be a quarterback. It can be a running back. It can be a wide receiver. Whoever was the best player in the NFL that year, defensive tackle, corner, doesn't matter. The best player in the NFL should win that award. But they assign value to this. And so if you're looking at pure value, Dak Prescott was more valuable, in my opinion, than Lamar Jackson was this year.
Wow. You know what? We are venting this morning.
And I say that, yeah. And I want to be clear. Lamar Jackson is my favorite NFL player and has been since he was drafted. I love Lamar Jackson. But Dak was unbelievable this year. Unbelievable.
Rain Dakota Prescott, Dalton's MVP for sure, and should be the NFL MVP this season. I agree. I think it's also very rare that you see a quarterback so late in their career have this reemergence, if you will, that he had this season. And I was talking about this yesterday. It's so interesting that the conversation of Mike McCarthy's job being on the line is coming up. And look, it happens during this time of the season, especially with the Cowboys being in such a dry spell for the last 30 years, not making it to the conference championship. So I understand the value that making it to that point, at least in the playoffs, will hold for Mike McCarthy this season. However, it's so interesting to me that the conversation is if Mike's job is in jeopardy, because me personally, I don't think so. I really don't see Mike McCarthy getting fired, even if they go 0-1 in the postseason against the Packers. And we'll talk about that matchup a little bit more during this episode. Sorry, my dog is sneezing in the background. But I think it's incredible what Mike McCarthy has done since starting his coaching tenure in Dallas. He has been the first head coach since the 1993-1995 Dallas Cowboys to have 3 straight seasons with 12 victories. That's not an easy feat. It's just so interesting to me that conversation comes up each and every year about Mike McCarthy, considering what he's done. And hold on, Dalton, you got a soapbox. I'm a soapbox about Mike McCarthy here because I am a Mike McCarthy stan as it comes to this season, especially what he's done with this Cowboys offense. The play calling has been absolutely game-changing for guys like Dak Prescott. So to put a little bow on your point about Dak, I also think it's no coincidence that Dak is playing like he is with Mike McCarthy, calling the plays and everything he's been able to do for the offense. After the game, Dak talked about after, the Cowboys commanded the Commanders on Sunday, Dak talked about the communication and the purpose, the play caller purpose, being the biggest difference from this year at this time compared to last year. Everybody knows their why. Everybody knows why things are happening within the play calls. That's not something that Kellen Moore necessarily had with this offense last season specifically. There was a ton of miscues, miscommunications, missed routes when you're talking about the Cowboys last year and kind of what their downfalls were. You're not seeing that with this Dallas Cowboys team. Everybody knows where they need to be. Everybody just knows their why. And I think give credit to Mike McCarthy because what he's done for this Cowboys offense is phenomenal.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly bring up that yes, 12 wins in 3 straight seasons is a fantastic accomplishment. There is one extra game now, so it's a little bit different. But still, 12 wins in 3 consecutive seasons, especially for the Dallas Cowboys, because when you look at the Cowboys under Jason Garrett, it was, oh, they were 11 and 5. They were 12 and 4. They were, 13 and 3. 10 and 6. Next year they're 5 and 12. Next year they're 8 and 8. Like there was no consistency from season to season when it came to Jason Garrett, and injuries play a massive part of that. But we lost Dak Prescott for 5 games last year, and the defense carried this team for 5 weeks. So I think that really goes to show how much different the preparation is with Mike McCarthy and this football team compared to teams in the past for the Dallas Cowboys.
Absolutely. If you hear my dog barking, I'm so sorry.
Don't
Dalton,
at
I'm
all.
going to hand it over to you real quick to tell the people kind of a little recap of this Washington blowout that the Cowboys had over the weekend.
Yeah, go for it. I got it. Listen, guys, when we look, I'm just gonna go full cam. Why not? Um, when we look at this Cowboys game against the Washington Commanders, the one thing that really kind of jumped out to me was offensively with this team, things weren't going well early on. And sometimes when we see that and teams are kind of sticking around with the Dallas Cowboys, it turns into a game where you just kind of play down to your competition for the entire game. I think that the Cowboys did a really good job in this game of kind of rolling with the punches and figuring it out as things progressed in this game. They figured out what was going to work and what wasn't going to work, and their offense really turned things around. And then once the offense kind of turns things around, gets the ball moving, and gets into the end zone a couple of times, once this team is up, they're not losing a lead because then that defense can really attack and you're just not going to be able to catch up. But I think early on in this game, especially, you saw a defense that was leaking a little bit. And that does have to be a little bit worrisome. And we're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers coming up here. And I think that the one great thing about the Dallas Cowboys is that on any given day, one of those units can dominate. But you really need to, if you want to make it to a Super Bowl, you need to be able to have both at the same time. And that's something that we haven't seen from the Dallas Cowboys, especially in the playoffs the past couple of seasons, is that complementary football of your offense, defense, and special teams all coming together at the same time.
Dalton, you gotta love working from home and just the most
Mm-hmm.
random things happening only at the times we record this podcast. Shout out to you for being the real MVP. Talking about Dak being the MVP, you absolutely are. Somebody decided to knock on my door. Wit was going ballistic over here while Dalton was giving you all that good info from Sunday's game. So shout out to Dalton for that. But what I will say is, it's so interesting is you always tend to compare teams year to year from this point last year to now, kind of the differences. And my question to you is, there's some obvious downfalls with every team heading into the postseason. Everybody has a weakness, some more than others. However, the Cowboys seem to consistently have the same issues that have been their downfalls in all 5 of their losses in the regular season. That being their run defense, pre-snap penalties, and not being able to score touchdowns. Really, anytime they're not able to drive down the field. It's not necessarily driving down the field that's the issue. It's scoring touchdowns and then relying on Brandon Aubrey to score those points. Do any of those things kind of concern you as the Cowboys get ready for the postseason? Was this game enough? Oh, and winning on the road. Let's not forget that part of it. Do any of these things kind of concern you? Obviously, Cowboys playing at home for at least the first 2 rounds, but going into this, what concerns you the most for this team? If they have a kryptonite, is it still all of that or one aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to look at the run defense first and foremost. And I know that I've downplayed their issues against the run at times this year, just because their overall efficiency has actually been pretty good, even though they have a league worst success rate against the run. So I think when we look at this defense, they've done a really good job this year, I think, of bending and not breaking. At least that's what it feels like anecdotally. Teams will move the ball a little bit, but they really do a good job of kind of leaking a little bit of oil and then getting stops as teams kind of get past the 50-yard line. So I think that that's one thing for me that I would worry about. Packers' offensive line is not bad, and they have a running back in Aaron Jones who, even though he's a little bit older, is still very dynamic and is actually coming off one of his best games of the season in a game that they actually absolutely had to have. So I think that's the one thing that I'm really looking at.
Yeah, shout out to Aaron Jones. I know Cowboys fans are not going to like me saying that, but Aaron Jones from El Paso started my first job over there at the Sun City and got to meet Aaron right before he got drafted to the Packers when he was still a Cowboys fan. So obviously, Aaron and I had some stuff to talk about before the draft, and he may or may not have admitted it was a catch by Dez. So that gives you some peace going into this game. I don't know what will. As for this Commanders game, obviously this was a game they should have won. Let's be honest. The Commanders were 4-12 going into this game. Ron Rivera no longer the head coach for the Washington Commanders as well, which we also saw that one coming. Um, but what was the most concerning part of that first quarter for you? Because I think really everything started to pick up towards the second quarter, third, obviously, fourth quarter starters were sitting as they should have been at that point. But is there anything that concerned you? Because for me personally, I think the one thing I've been wanting to see more of from this Cowboys team is quicker starts and consistently scoring after they do quickly, because you just haven't seen that. It's usually either they don't score early or they do and then they go a couple of drives without scoring and then you kind of see it pick back up come second quarter. I just want to see a complete game here. Is there anything that concerns you about what you saw against Washington going into the postseason, or did they do what they needed to do and that's the end of it?
The only thing that concerned me, it wasn't in the, well, it kind of was in the first quarter, um, but a blocked field goal and a missed field goal. Not
Let's
great,
talk about it.
Bob. Not great, Bob. This is it was just a replay in my head as I was watching this game. It was just a replay of last year, where like, listen, last year was completely different because it was five missed extra points or something insane like that. Um, but Mr. Automatic, Brandon Aubrey, who has earned his name on this football team, had a field goal blocked and then missed another field goal. And then he banged home a what? It was a 53-yard field goal. I mean, so that's the thing for me that kind of gives me the confidence that he's going to be okay and this kicking game is going to be okay is, first of all, coming from professional soccer, like there is already pressure on you, especially if you're doing corner kicks or anything like that. If you are the free kick guy, that's going to be a ton of pressure. So you know how to deal with that, and that's an even crazier environment sometimes than a football game. And I think if you're kind of disassociated from the sport in general, like Brandon Aubrey might not be a huge like football fan per se. He's just really good at kicking. And we have to understand as well that a lot of guys in the NFL like don't love football. It's just they're insanely good at it. They're physically gifted enough to play this game at a professional level. But Aubrey coming back and putting that 53 yarder just straight down the middle. I was worried for a while, but that really got me back into it. And I wouldn't have said his name if he missed that one today.
Yeah, you know what's really disheartening about both of those misses is that had he made both of them, he would have officially tied the NFL record for the most consecutive kicks in an NFL season. So for me, like I wanted him to get that record more than anything, obviously, but I also maybe I'm superstitious. Get the miss out of the way. That's how I feel about it. Get the miss out of the way, get the record out of the way, get that out of your head, start fresh going into the postseason because you did see what happened last year. And that was a really big turning point, obviously, for the Cowboys kicking situation, which kind of started Brandon Aubrey's invisible string theory, if you will, to get to the Dallas Cowboys. And so, for me, when it comes to Brandon Aubrey, I'm not worried. I know it feels very deja vu esque for obvious reasons, and I understand that. It's just you're dealing with such a different kind of kicker, and he's younger, and he still has professional experience, right? So maybe it's not football like you said, but it's not just soccer. He also had his USFL experience. This guy can kick a football, and I don't think yips are an issue. I don't think, you'll see another miss. I think he's good. I think it's a two very different situations. It's just the NFL scriptwriters are absolutely doing their due diligence with making Cowboys fans feel a little deja vu esque with both of those during this game. But shout out to special teams for starting off with that blocked field goal and then kind of coming back with one of their own, Peyton Hendershot, having his revival. You saw a leaping Hendershot towards the end of the game as well. So I like that. I like the bounce back. I like the ability to adjust as well. Always good to see there. But let's talk about this offense, the run game. That's something that we've always talked about on this podcast. We talked about throughout the entire regular season. I don't know about you, Dalton. It kind of looked like a vintage Tony Pollard has returned to the chat. Vintage Tony Pollard has re entered the chat. And I was really excited to see how he was playing against the Commanders, given he should have played like that. It was the Commanders. But you haven't seen Tony Pollard play like that all season. Physical, breaking holes, breaking tackles. He looked like Tony Pollard again. And if that's what you're seeing in the postseason, welcome back, TP, and very excited to see. What do you think was the difference maker? Because keep in mind, the Cowboys did not have their starting offensive line. What was the difference maker for Tony Pollard in this game?
Do you want to know how broken we are as fans? I mean, just this is the way that it goes. You kind of get tunnel vision. If I asked you, where do you think the Cowboys rank in rushing efficiency, rushing EPA, and rushing success rate? What would their ranking be? In your mind, what do you think it is?
It's definitely going to be higher than I'm thinking. And I think that's your point with it, right? It
But I
has to
mean, just
be,
throw some, yeah, but just throw some numbers out there. Just your first instinct. What do you
I'm
think
going to
it
say
is?
like 12. 12?
Okay, yeah, you're pretty spot on here. They are
Oh, really?
11th in
Very good.
rushing EPA on offense, and they are ninth in rushing success rate. And we've looked at this rushing attack all year like it sucks. And that's just not really the case. The passing attack is so good, is so efficient. I mean, number 2 in the NFL, and the only team better than it is the San Francisco 49ers, who are just an absolute machine offensively. So I think when you look at this, yes, I have been a bit disappointed in Tony Pollard this year, not just because I felt like the rushing attack in general has been a little bit lackluster, but I believe that he himself was leaving plays on the field that he never used to. And I don't know if he was pressing, and what was going on, if he felt like, coming back from the injury, he wasn't quite there yet. So he was trying to get up and down field quicker and not busting, those big plays that we've really gotten used to seeing him make. And he has looked better in recent weeks. And I think that if he can come into the playoffs at 100%, and if you can keep Rico Dowdle healthy, which love him, love the way that he runs, but tough to remain healthy at times for him. I think that it's a rushing attack that is good enough to complement this passing attack, specifically when you get into those second down and short, third down and short situations where you don't have to put all of the pressure on Dak Prescott. Now, what I don't want to see is a 1st and 10 incompletion and then a 2nd and 10 run. No, I don't want to see that. We also have to understand and ask and beg for a couple of CD Lamb touches on the ground, or a couple of Cavante Turpin on the ground this week to try to get the ball to the outside and to try to open up the rest of the rushing attack.
I love that. Those special packages would be great to see. You also have a Hunter Lipke as an option as well if you wanted to really get creative. I know there's some trust issues there. I know there's some trust issues there now, but give the guy a chance. I promise. What I saw at training camp, and that was months ago, right? He's improved tenfold since then. it was pretty cool. So, I'm hoping to see a little bit more of that, although I know there's some trust issues. We gotta move on. We gotta forgive. We gotta forget. It's okay. Um, as for Tony Pollard, I'm glad you brought up the injury because, a few weeks ago, it was really interesting. People were asking him, and given it's the same reporters that have been asking him the same questions every week of, "Are you sure you're feeling okay? You're really not feeling anything from the leg injury?" And it wasn't until a few weeks ago when he actually admitted that, yeah, he was. And it wasn't until after their bye week that he really started to feel better and started to understand kind of the aftershock, if you will, of coming back from that kind of injury. And it took him a little longer than he expected. And you know what? I think if you're seeing a slower progression of what you want to see out of Tony Pollard, it would make sense that he's being more productive now, but also that goes hand in hand with the play calling. Like you were just mentioning too, you also cannot have a consistent rushing attack when you're not consistently calling the run and sticking to the run throughout the entire game. And I think one of Mike McCarthy's biggest flaws as the play caller, because I can agree with him as a play caller, I can support him as a play caller, and majority of the time I do. But I think one of his biggest flaws is not staying consistent with the run and also the ball distribution. Overall, I think still needs some work at times, especially between Rico and Tony. You saw that 1-2 punch just have so much success last season with Zeke and Tony, and although I don't really think you need to do that yet with these two, I just think giving Rico the ball a little bit more to maybe preserve the health of Tony Pollard would be ideal. But I also liked getting them involved in the passing game. I think seeing Rico and what he can do in the passing game was phenomenal. Such an angry runner. Love his run style as well. But overall, excited for TP to see what he does in the postseason. And speaking of a passing attack, how could we not talk about CeeDee Lamb in this episode? I mean, it's CeeDee Lamb. Absolutely phenomenal season for the wide receiver one of your Dallas Cowboys. What did you notice? Sorry, I have stuff falling over here. What did you notice from CD throughout the course of the season? Where has he grown as the starting receiver since last season when he really took that role uh, for himself?
Um, you know, it's funny. I think it just kind of comes down to the consistency and scheme, honestly, because when you look at last year, the inconsistencies earlier in the year, and listen, he went on an absolute tear in the back half of last year, so he was already that player. But I think when you look at it in totality, it was, all of the option routes that were going on, the misjudging of what he was seeing post snap compared to what Dak Prescott was seeing post snap, giving up on some plays over the middle of the field. And I think going not more rudimentary, because this offense is definitely not any simpler than the last one that he was coming from. I think that they have just really fit guys into good roles here. And obviously, he is a huge ball hog, and he should be a huge ball hog. The most targets in the NFL this year, the most receptions in the NFL this year. He is a bona fide number one guy. He is, in my opinion, the third best wide receiver in the NFL. And every single week when he gets out on the football field, I think that he's getting closer to the top two. And so it's going to be really interesting to see, kind of how that manifests itself in the playoffs. I want to see how teams defend him specifically. But it's hard to defend just him because Jake Ferguson could kill you, and Brandon Cooks gets every single corner route in the end zone from Dak Prescott. So I just think that they have a ton to deal with offensively, especially in the passing attack. And I think it's going to be difficult for defenses in the playoffs to deal with that.
Absolutely. And speaking of the playoffs, let's get into that matchup a little bit. I don't want to run out of time like we usually do when we're going on rants about these kind of wins, but this is a very important week for the Dallas Cowboys. They are taking on the Green Bay Packers for the wild card round at home at AT&T Stadium. Let's start with what the Cowboys offense is going to face with this Packers defense. Biggest matchups you see in this game, Dalton.
You got to deal with Rashawn Gary. Defensively, that dude can absolutely wreck your game. He is one of the most unfair athletes in the NFL. He's built like a refrigerator. and he is endlessly explosive and powerful. So I think him coming off of that right side is going to be a really scary thing for the Dallas Cowboys this week. He can, like I said, he can wreck a game, but that's not all that they have on that defensive line either. They've spent resources there. They have, some young guys who can rush the passer as well. Kenny Clark is still on the interior. So that's really what I'm looking at. But I do think that when you look at this Cowboys offense and their ability to hit the windows over the middle of the field, I think that when you look at the safety play in Green Bay, I think that's where you want to attack. You want to attack the middle of the field, and it'll be interesting to see if Joe Barry travels his best corner, who was literally just suspended 2 weeks ago, Jair Alexander. See if he travels with CeeDee Lamb in this game, because that would be, just first of all, as a football junkie, amazing to watch for 4 quarters, because Jair Alexander is probably the premier crap talker defensively in the NFL. He's, first of all, he's a gnat. Nobody moves the way that he does really on the back end. He's a legitimate jitterbug. You cannot get rid of him. And so for me, he's one of the most fun cornerbacks or defensive players to watch in the entire NFL. Plus, he legitimately thinks that he is better than everybody at everything ever. That's just his personality. He has that perfect cornerback mentality.
No icks over here. None at all. I'm not getting an
And,
ick.
yes, yeah, right. And then going against CeeDee Lamb, who after every single reception is going to, for the first down, that could be a very interesting matchup in this football game, because I think those two can get to jawing each other. But that's kind of what I'm looking at for the Cowboys on offense versus their defense. On the other side of the ball, this is a very, very, very young receiving core, and they have some very talented and young tight ends as well. Both rookie tight ends, both super athletic guys. And if there's one kind of issue with the Dallas Cowboys, you've kind of seen it's been safety play and second level linebacker play, in coverage. I think having some of those safety linebacker hybrid types could be good in this game for pass defense. Cowboys like to play a lot of man defense. And I want to see how they match up against these wide receivers, because I think that that's one matchup that the Cowboys could really own in this game. Not because they're not talented, but because they're a little bit younger, a little bit more inexperienced. And as long as Stephon Gilmore is healthy, I think that you have the advantage in the secondary. It'll all come down to their ability to pressure Jordan Love. Jordan Love, first of all, watching him yesterday, and we've kind of seen it all year, the mannerisms, there's a lot of Aaron Rodgers in his game. Like good Aaron Rodgers, back when Aaron Rodgers was more athletic than he is now. He has all the arm talent in the world. It's the consistency. With him, he's still a young player. And so there's still some scattershot situations here with the ball placement. And if you can pressure him, I think that you can really affect this offense. The problem is their offensive line, I think, is a really big strength for them, especially as the season has progressed. It'll come down to their ability, Dallas Cowboys' ability to rush the passer, specifically on the edges, in my opinion, going up against Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom. Zach Tom has been a revelation for them at right tackle. But I think it'll come down to, can Micah Parsons and Tank Lawrence be the difference makers in this game, because they're kind of the difference makers in every game.
I also saw something that said that the Packers are actually the youngest team going into the playoffs overall.
Yes.
There's a lot of youth, which can be good or bad, and I'm gonna
I
say that
yeah, I
go
think
ahead.
with the Packers, yeah, I think with the Packers, sorry to cut you off, but I think with the Packers, it's why you've seen some really inconsistent play from them this year. They've lost to some teams they had no business losing to, but then they've also come out and beat a lot of very good teams. I saw this just a little while ago. Jordan Love has, and I know PFF grades can be good or bad depending on how you feel about PFF, but he is the third highest PFF grade against teams with winning records this year. So he's been playing well against good competition this year.
Oh no, I love that. And what I was gonna say is you were just mentioning Tank, and it's so funny when I heard that this is such a young team going into the playoffs. The first person I thought about was Demarcus Lawrence because a couple weeks ago Dan Quinn actually talked about his ability to kind of be patient and not chase plays. And I'm paraphrasing at this point, but that's pretty much Tank's bread and butter is he's going to find a way to take advantage of the youth and the mistakes that he knows that they can make being younger players, and he's going to take it and just absolutely dominate it. I feel like this is going to be such a tank heavy game, and you've been seeing him on this up and up, looking more and more like vintage Tank. But I also think it's a good game, a good learning game for somebody like Micah Parsons, who, yes, is already dominant, already one of the best defensive players, if not the best in the NFL. And I just think this is a good way for him to really be patient in this game and kind of follow DeMarcus's lead on that, because I think that's something that Micah Parsons is getting better at, and he's gotten better at over the last couple of years specifically. But I think the patience that he has learned and grown over this season has been phenomenal. So I'm excited to see that come into play in this matchup. But what is one aspect of this game for the Cowboys that you think will be a make or break difference maker they need to do or they need not to do in order to win this game?
Be efficient on early downs. Be efficient on early downs because I don't want that pass rush for the Green Bay Packers to be able to kind of tee things up on third down. And listen, Dak Prescott has been unbelievable on third downs this year, but with their offensive line issues right now, Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and Lucas Van Ness, I don't want those guys to be able to pin their ears back on 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8 consistently. Stay ahead of the sticks. And being ahead of the sticks does not mean to run the ball on 1st and 2nd down and get to 3rd and 6. That's not what I mean. I mean,
Oh my
pass
goodness,
the
you
ball
killed me.
early, get to 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3, 2nd and 1, 3rd and 1, and run the ball and pick up first downs that way. Joe Barry and this defense will find a way to let you beat them. They will, but you have to stay ahead of the sticks.
You know what's interesting is they were talking about that on the broadcast yesterday. I don't know if you caught it, but kind of how dominant this Cowboys team can be if they pass on early downs, because that's where they find the most success. So I think it's funny that you're saying it now, because I heard that and it made my ears kind of perk up a little bit in the broadcast. I was like, actually, that does make sense. And I think Mike has done a better job at being a little bit more consistent than you've seen in the past. But there's other times where, like, let's not run the ball on early downs, please. Let's not. But also, um, as far as the defense goes, run defense, you have Jonathan Hankins back. Do you think what specifically do they need to do to kind of cap off Aaron Jones, neutralize that threat just right off the bat early on?
Uh, I don't think it's a defensive thing. I think it's an offensive thing. I think you win the coin toss, you get the ball, and you score immediately. Put them on the back foot immediately. I think that when you look at most football teams, you say defer, try to double up, get that touchdown, and get the ball after, in the second half. But the Cowboys, honestly, I can't remember the last time that they doubled up like that before half and then after. It may have happened, but I don't think of it. And with this defense specifically, I think that you want to play ahead. So why not take the ball immediately and try to get them ahead of their offensive schedule? So I think for me, that's what it is, because they're a good running team. They have a good offensive line. They have one really talented, dynamic back, and then they have another back who has legs the size of my torso. So AJ Dillon, have you ever seen that dude's legs? It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
it's
It doesn't
hilarious.
make
I just
sense.
it's hilarious. I can't.
And dude is
I cannot.
huge. He's like 6 foot tall, 245 pounds, and it's all below the waist. It's unbelievable. That dude's that dude's thighs are legitimately like the size of my midsection. It's unreal. And he uses those legs very well in short yardage situations. So for the Cowboys, again, it is that early down success. It's the same thing for the opposite side of the ball. It's early down success setting up their pass rush for 3rd and long situations.
And real quick, anything else you want to throw in there about this matchup with the Packers going into kind
Yeah.
of wrapping up this podcast?
I remember exactly where I was in 2016 when Dak Prescott brought the Cowboys back and almost won that game. I've seen Aaron Rodgers destroy this franchise. And seeing Jordan Love play this past week and watching him fade away from passes and throw darts into tight coverage while he's fading away and just kind of flowing in the backfield brought up a lot of negative feelings. And so for me, I am more uncomfortable with this game than I was a week ago. But I do think that when it comes down to it, the Cowboys playing at home, the Cowboys with all of the talent on this football team, I think that they have more than enough to get by the Green Bay Packers in the first round. And I actually think that I like the matchup in the second round better than I like this one. I think getting that second seed was massive because it allows you to skirt by the San Francisco 49ers until the conference championship game. And all I care about is getting to that level. You need to get past that boogeyman of the divisional round of the playoffs. Not just for your confidence moving forward, but for Dak Prescott's legacy. As much as we all love Dak and think that he was amazing this year, it does not matter if you can't get it done in the playoffs. So any stinkers from Dak Prescott in the playoffs would be catastrophic for the offseason narratives.
Yeah, well, hopefully
I
that's
don't
not
mean
the
to.
case.
I'm sorry.
Hopefully
I
that's
don't
not
mean to
the case.
sound. I don't mean to sound like
That was
I'm
very
scared about
Scroogey of
this
you.
game.
That
I'm
was giving
sorry.
Scrooge in January.
I
Not a fan of that.
PTSD comes out every once in a while. I think the Dallas Cowboys win this football game, but I do not think that the Green Bay Packers will be a pushover, especially offensively for them.
You know what worries me the most is, before, let's see, what was the last home game before the Lions? I'm trying to remember. Was it the Seahawks was the last game where the Cowboys were averaging about 40 points at home, even against good teams. And then you kind of started to see a little bit of the wheels falling off where that average has significantly dropped. So I think this is a time where, yes, that home field advantage needs to come and play. They need to score early, like you said, and they need to consistently score throughout this game. Luckily, weather will not be an issue in this game as it's an indoor stadium, so that's good. And also, that's why that number 2 seed comes into play because they have struggled to win on the road this season. They don't have to do that for at least the first 2 rounds if they make it past this week. And so they're setting themselves up for either their success or their downfall. So at this point, really, their fate is in their hands, and they know their areas of improvement to work on. But what I think is really funny is the storyline that comes into everybody's mind when you hear about the Packers is obviously the history, the recent history, if you will, with the Packers kind of being the downfall of the Cowboys' hopes and dreams 2016 and 2014. And yes, Dez did catch it. If anybody is wondering how Dalton and I feel about that, it was a
No,
catch.
he
It was
didn't.
a catch.
Okay, he
They
didn't.
came back and
By
said it was a catch.
by the rules at the time,
Nah,
it was
I'm going
not
by
a
the rules
catch.
now. I'm
And
going
the
by the rules
rules
now. Don't live in
now,
the
and
past, DJ.
by common sense, it was absolutely a catch. But
It was.
because the rules were terribly written back then, it was technically not a catch.
That's so crazy that you're saying
I
back then, and
also, I
and
also,
and I'm thinking, like, it wasn't that long ago,
it
but
was
I'm
a
like,
long
"Oh,
time
wait,
ago.
we're
It
in
was a decade ago. It
2024
was
now?"
almost a
It
decade
was
ago.
10
Yeah,
years ago. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
insane. Way to make me feel old today. But it's funny, you think about that storyline of the recent history, I'll say recent, even though it's, not as recent as we'd like to think because 'cause we're getting older, but also the Mike McCarthy ties to Green Bay, and although he said last night, "I'm not getting into the drama of it," although I'm sure you guys would love if I did, talking to the media, of course, um, you know that this game means something to Mike McCarthy. He has not beat the Green Bay Packers as, the Dallas Cowboys head coach. That is still something hanging on his back. They have not been able to do that yet. So, very storybook-esque start to the playoffs for the Cowboys to defeat a team that's defeated them multiple times, ended their season, and for Mike McCarthy to finally get that win as the Dallas Cowboys head coach against his former team. Can't have written it better. Like we were joking about in our morning meeting, these NFL scriptwriters, man, they're working hard. They're working some overtime with these wild card round matchups and how they kind of turned out to be in the playoffs. But Dalton, we usually do a PFNVP for the game. Uh, but I figured since we're at the end of the regular season, who was your PFMVP for the regular season for the Dallas Cowboys this year?
The PF MVP for the season for the Dallas Cowboys wasn't a person. It was an idea. It was the philosophical change at the bye week to open up this offense, to run a lot more motion, and to really, really fine tune things and make things more difficult for defenses. I think that was PFN MVP for the season for the Dallas Cowboys. If it had to be a person, it's Dak Prescott, but CeeDee Lamb was unbelievable. Listen, when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, they had maybe the most productive corner in the NFL, the most productive receiver in the NFL. You can argue Tyreek as well, but it's neither here nor there. Fantastic quarterback and arguably the defensive player of the year. Like, the Cowboys have the top tier talent to do this. They are a fantastically talented football team. Now it's about doing it. Go out and just win, baby.
My PFMVP, since you named Dak as your person, if it had to be a person, I'm going to give mine to Mike McCarthy. I'm really holding
I
strong
like
on
it.
this Mike McCarthy train this week because the difference he has made for this Cowboys offense it's really astonishing compared to what you saw at this point last year and the progression, the time he's taken to make his chemistry with Dak Prescott just known. Even after the game on Sunday, Dak was talking about. He said, I owe and appreciate Mike McCarthy so much. Paraphrasing again, my words, not his, but essentially saying just the time that Mike has put into making sure that he is successful as this team's quarterback. It's obviously paying dividends, allowing everybody to know the play calling purpose, the why has been so important. And more importantly, for the players to know their why and to play to their why. I just think you're seeing such a different offense. And he also cares about them as people. He cares about their mental health. And, maybe his coaching style isn't for everybody, but I think home field advantage has been such a perk because he allows the players to do things that maybe other head coaches don't do. He's more modernized with his approach of allowing them to sleep in their own beds before home games, not making them sleep at a team hotel and be uncomfortable. He really does prioritize his players, their mental health, their well being. And so, all that to say, Mike McCarthy's play calling was a difference maker for this team and getting them to this point this season. And his ability to adjust when things were not working. He adjusted, he took criticism, and he's continued to improve. So I'm going to give my flowers and my PF MVP for the season to Mike McCarthy. All right, Dalton, where can the people find you if they want to tweet loving messages about how absolutely adorable your baby is because he's so freaking cute and I'm obsessed? Where can the people tweet you?
Dalton B. Miller. And you can also find content on Dalton B. Miller 1 on TikTok.
That's right. We're getting the TikTok stardom going. I'm going to follow you on TikTok. I got to see what all the hype is about there. I'm at Jess __ on Twitter. If you guys have any questions that you want us to answer in next week's episode, please tweet us. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Any questions, we'd love to chat with you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to another episode this week. We really hope that the next time we are talking to you, your Dallas Cowboys are heading to the divisional round of the NFL playoffs and that they have defeated the Green Bay Packers. We're going to manifest it. We are just going to speak it into existence now that Dalton, next time we're talking, the Dallas Cowboys have done that and slayed their first dragon of the 2023 postseason. Dalton Miller, thank you so much for joining me. Doing this every week. It's been so fun. I cannot believe it. Bye. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week. Wild card game. game. It is a whiteout, so wear white to support your Dallas Cowboys if you're heading to the game. And if you're not, wear white anyways. Who's stopping you? Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. Go gloat to all of your fellow Eagles fans that they are frauds. In the name of the PFN Dallas Cowboys podcast, have a great week. Bye, everybody.